Have you ever paused to wonder if our traditional understanding of intelligence, that singular, all-encompassing measure we often default to, truly captures the full spectrum of human brilliance?
hmm
What if being smart isn't just one thing, but maybe a rich, diverse tapestry of abilities?
That's exactly the question we're diving into today. We're exploring Howard Gardner's groundbreaking theory of multiple intelligences.
A perspective that's really shaken things up.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's fundamentally reshaped how we think about human potential over the past few decades. So our mission really is to pull out the key insights.
Okay.
What intelligence really is, how it shows up in, well, sometimes surprising ways, and what it means for how we learn and live.
Great. So we'll look at where the idea came from, its unique definition of intelligence, and maybe how it stacks up against older views, like IQ tests.
Exactly. We'll compare it to those conventional measures, and we'll also highlight some really fascinating examples.
Like how these intelligences appear in people.
In people, across cultures, even in the structure of the brain itself.
Okay, sounds fascinating. Let's unpack this.
All right, let's start at the beginning, the genesis of it all. This whole idea grew out of a project on human potential at Harvard's Graduate School of Education.
When was this?
Back in 1979. It got significant funding from the Bernard Van Leer Foundation.
And Gardner himself had an interesting take on it.
He did. He quipped that the subject felt more like a, quote, West Coast topic.
What do you mean?
More open, expansive, maybe focused on human flourishing, rather than a typical button-down East Coast academic thing. It sort of set the stage for looking beyond just narrow academic skills.
And that led to a really different definition of intelligence, didn't it?
Radically different. Instead of just your score on some test, Gardner defined intelligence as the ability to solve problems or to create products that are valued within one or more cultural settings.
The key phrase there being valued within cultural setting.
Precisely. And what's powerful is that the definition, it deliberately doesn't say how you should test these abilities.
Which opens it up much more, right, to real-world stuff.
Exactly. It recognizes brilliance in art, sports, social skills, things far beyond the usual classroom metrics.
So how did he decide what counts as an intelligence?
Good question. He laid out 8 distinct criteria, or he called them signs, to sort of figure out what is and what isn't an intelligence.
Not rigid rules, then?
No, more like strong indicators, a kind of checklist. For example, one sign is if a specific ability can be isolated due to brain damage.
Ah, so if only one thing is lost, it suggests it's a distinct function.
Right. Another is whether it can be encoded in a symbol system, like language or math symbols.
Interesting.
Gardner actually noted that these criteria, even though they're fundamental, haven't really gotten as much airtime as the list of intelligences itself.
Which is odd because they seem pretty foundational to the whole theory.
They really are among the most original parts of his work, he felt.
And this new way of looking at it, it really clashed with the traditional views.
Oh, definitely. You can think of it like that hedgehogs versus foxes idea.
Explain that a bit.
Okay, so the hedgehogs, thinkers like Spearman and Terman, they believed intelligence was basically one big thing, a single general capacity.
The famous G factor, general intelligence.
That's the one. It was thought to underlie everything cognitive. But the foxes, like Thurstone and Guilford, they argued for multiple separate factors.
More complex.
Right. But Gardner's MI theory, it goes even further than the foxes. It's different because it doesn't just rely on how test scores correlate.
What else does it use?
Much broader evidence. Neurological findings, evolutionary perspectives, cross-cultural data. It's a much wider, more robust base.
Which brings us back to the limitations of traditional IQ tests.
Exactly. Viewed through Gardner's lens, they really fall short. They tend to favor people from certain educational backgrounds.
People used to pencil and paper tests.
Right. And they mostly measure what we call crystallized knowledge.
Stuff you've already learned. Facts and skills.
Yeah. What they often miss is fluid intelligence. That's your ability to tackle new problems, adapt, think abstractly.
Even if you haven't encountered that specific problem before.
Exactly. And there's a really striking example from the research.
Oh.
You can have someone who loses their entire frontal lobes, which are vital for planning, problem solving.
Crucial executive functions.
Right. They become a radically different person, unable to solve new puzzles, yet their IQ score might still be near genius level.
Wow. That really shows the limits, doesn't it?
It vividly highlights how little those tests might tell us about potential for future growth, or what Vygotsky called the zone of potential development.
That gap between what you can do alone and what you can do with help.
Mm-hmm. the potential waiting to be unlocked.
So IQ tests were one target, but Gardner also critiqued other big psychological theories of his time.
He did. He acknowledged Piaget's brilliance, especially in taking children's thinking seriously and mapping developmental stages.
But he saw issues there, too.
Yeah, he felt Piaget's stages sometimes seemed too abrupt, too discontinuous. And the tasks Piaget used, while clever, often felt a bit artificial.
Remote from the kind of thinking in which most individuals engage during their normal daily lives, I think was the phrase.
Exactly. And then there was information processing psychology, which was huge back then.
Trying to map mental steps second by second.
Right, almost like trying to simulate thinking on a computer. Very micro level.
But maybe missing the bigger picture.
Gardner thought so. He felt it often lacked a comprehensive theory of mind and tended to focus too much on logical or mathematical problems.
So, again, missing that wider spectrum of human thought, creativity, social intelligence.
Precisely. He saw a need for a broader framework, one more sensitive to culture and real-world complexities.
Okay, so if intelligence isn't just one thing, what are these different forms Gardner identified? Let's maybe walk through a few.
Sure. Let's start with linguistic intelligence. This is much more than just being articulate or having a big vocabulary.
It's deeper.
Much deeper. It's a real sensitivity to word meanings, shades of meaning, the ability to combine words in fresh ways, and just a fascination with language itself.
Like poets have.
Exactly. He mentions the poet Robert Lowell, who could apparently recall and even improve verses from great poets effortlessly, made others feel like backward evolutionary forms.
Huh. Quite the image. And the brain gives us clues here, too.
Big clues. Injuries to specific areas cause distinct language problems, known as aphasias.
You mentioned Broca's and Wernicke's areas earlier.
Right. Damage Broca's area, usually in the left frontal lobe, and speech becomes very clipped, telegraphic, lots of nouns, simple sentences. Gardner called it a caricature of Hemingway.
Okay, and Wernicke's area.
Damage there, further back, and the person might speak fluently, complex sentences even, but the words are jumbled, the meaning gets lost. A caricature of Faulkner.
Incredible how localized those functions seem to be.
It really points to distinct components of linguistic ability.
All right, what about musical intelligence?
This involves core abilities like sensitivity to pitch, rhythm, timbre, the emotional power of music.
Not just playing an instrument.
No, it's more fundamental. Think of composers. Stravinsky apparently said composing was doing, not thinking.
An intuitive process.
Very much so. Schoenberg quoted Schopenhauer suggesting composers reveal the world's essence in a language which his reason does not understand.
Wow. And culture plays a huge role here, right?
Massively. Look at the Suzuki talent education method in Japan.
Immersion from a very young age.
Exactly. Kids as young as 2 or 3, practicing constantly. But Suzuki's success isn't just about drilling scales.
What else is involved?
It's about leveraging relationships, using that strong mother-child bond, peer imitation, social learning, using interpersonal intelligence to navigate the musical pathway.
That's a really interesting link between different intelligences.
It is. And biologically, there are parallels with things like birdsong.
How so?
Birdsong is one of the few animal skills known to be lateralized, controlled mainly by one brain hemisphere, often the left, just like human language.
Fascinating connection. Okay, what's next? Maybe logical mathematical. That's the one most people think of as intelligence.
Right, the kind IQ tests heavily favor. It's about abstract reasoning, logic, numbers, recognizing patterns, deductive thinking.
Scientists, mathematicians, programmers.
Exactly. Analyzing problems, thinking sequentially, making logical connections. It's clearly crucial in many fields.
Then you have spatial intelligence.
Yes, thinking in 3D. Perceiving the visual world accurately, manipulating images in your mind.
Like an architect visualizing a building.
Or a surgeon navigating the human body, a sculptor working with form, even a chess player anticipating moves on the board.
Or just finding your way around without GPS.
Ah, yes. Building those mental maps, it's about understanding relationships in space.
And bodily kinesthetic intelligence. You mentioned Marcel Marceau.
Yes, the mastery of one's own body movements, and also skill in handling objects. Marceau creating illusions with just his body that requires incredible precision and expressive control.
So it's not just raw athleticism.
No, it's refined skill.
Yeah.
Think dancers, craftspeople, surgeons again. There's a deep evolutionary history here, too.
Like tool use.
Exactly. Chimps using modified twigs for termite fishing, the gradual evolution of hominid tools alongside growing brain size. It's a fundamental human capacity.
And culturally expressed in so many ways.
Hugely varied, from ritualistic dances like among the Hopi, where it's a communal duty, to more improvisational forms like in Samoa.
Even elite athletes like Wayne Gretzky.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just instinct.
He himself said it was like studying. He described studying hockey the way a med student studies medicine. It's about deep practice, reading situations, anticipating, embodied knowledge.
And there's naturalist intelligence. That one was added a bit later, wasn't it?
Yes, it emerged as Gardner refined the theory. It's the ability to recognize, categorize, and understand the natural world, plants, animals, ecological patterns.
So biologists, farmers, chefs maybe,
Yeah.
anyone deeply attuned to nature.
Right. Understanding ecosystems, weather patterns, the characteristics of living things. It's about seeing patterns and relationships in the natural environment.
Okay, and finally, the personal intelligences.
These are crucial, divided into two: interpersonal and intrapersonal.
Interpersonal is understanding others.
Yes. Sensing their feelings, motivations, intentions, being able to interact effectively. Teachers, therapists, salespeople, leaders often have this strength.
And interpersonal.
That's self-knowledge. Understanding your own feelings, strengths, weaknesses, motivations, having an accurate model of yourself.
These seem quite high level.
They are often seen that way. But the roots are deep. Even tiny infants, just a couple of months old, can discriminate and imitate facial expressions.
Showing they're already tuned into others' feelings.
A kind of pre-tunedness, yeah. Suggests a fundamental biological basis for empathy and connection.
And that idea of self-knowledge, intrapersonal, it doesn't develop in a vacuum, right?
Absolutely not. It's profoundly shaped by our interactions with others. Theorists like Mead and Vygotsky argued that we come to know ourselves through knowing others.
Our reflection in their eyes, so to speak.
In a way, yes. The long dependency period in primates, that intense mother-child bond, these are seen as evolutionary drivers for our focus on understanding ourselves and others.
And even brain science hints at the complexity of self. You mentioned split-brain patients.
Right. Studies on patients where the connection between the hemispheres is cut suggest potentially different orientations, maybe even hints of separate awareness streams.
The left hemisphere more verbal, analytical.
And the right, more emotional, spatial, maybe more involved in that interpersonal realm. It paints a picture of the self as this complex, integrated, yet multifaceted system.
Okay, so we have this rich tapestry of intelligences. What does this mean in practice, especially for something like education?
Well, Gardner is quite clear on this. He stresses that MI theory itself shouldn't be the educational goal.
Meaning, don't just teach the 8 intelligences.
Exactly. Instead, first figure out your educational values, what you actually want students to learn and be able to do. Then, MI theory becomes incredibly useful.
How so?
By suggesting multiple ways to present the material, catering to different strengths, and using diverse ways to let students show what they've learned.
Moving beyond just tests.
Right. He made that provocative statement. We should not think of students as disabled. We should instead consider whether our curricula may be disabled.
Wow. That really flicks the script. It puts the onus on the system to adapt.
It does. It challenges the one-size-fits-all model.
But some might push back, right? What about student responsibility?
It's not about removing responsibility. It's about creating conditions where students can be responsible and successful. If the only way to learn relies on an intelligence that isn't your strength, it's incredibly hard to engage.
So understanding strengths helps find pathways to engagement.
Exactly. And it makes you question the structure of schools. Think about traditional religious schools. Huge focus on linguistic intelligence, memorizing texts, and interpersonal bonds with the teacher.
Right. Whereas modern secular schools
Often heavily prioritize logical mathematical skills, maybe some interpersonal skills like self-reflection, but things like spatial, bodily, kinesthetic, musical, they often get pushed to the margins. After-school clubs.
It's no wonder some kids feel alienated or struggle if their strengths aren't valued in the main classroom.
Precisely. And it can make transitions between different educational systems or into the workforce difficult if the valued intelligences suddenly shift.
So if we want effective education using this lens, assessment needs to change too.
Drastically. Forget just paper and pencil tests. We need to look for things like pattern recognition abilities in different contexts.
How quickly someone picks up a new skill.
Yes, finding those intriguing puzzles or moments where something just clicks for them, those crystallizing experiences.
Can you give an example? What might these assessments look like?
Well, it could be observing how a young child interacts with building blocks for spatial skills. Or for a 6-year-old, maybe a jigsaw puzzle. For an older kid, perhaps a Rubik's Cube.
Things that naturally tap into different ways of thinking.
Right. Watching how they approach a problem, how they learn from mistakes, how engaged they are, it gives a much richer, more authentic picture of their potential.
Gardner also speculated about where MI theory could go next,
Right.
especially with things like AI and animal cognition.
Yeah, he raised some fascinating questions for the future. Like, how do these human intelligences relate to the emergence of whole disciplines or societal roles?
And how do our minds handle interdisciplinary work, combining different ways of thinking?
Mm-hmm. And could we apply MI perspectives to understand intelligence in, say, dogs or birds, or even in sophisticated AI, robots, or smart machines?
It really broadens the whole concept. Makes you wonder.
It does, and it raises other big questions. If intelligence is so diverse and culturally situated, how do we think about concepts like originality or wisdom?
Good point. How did Gardner approach those?
He suggested originality isn't usually a general trait. It happens within a specific domain after you've achieved some mastery there. You innovate in music or physics or cooking.
You need the foundation first.
Right. And wisdom. He saw that as something broader, a kind of synthesizing power.
Bringing different things together.
Yeah, often seen in older individuals, combining common sense, maybe some domain-specific originality, and what he called a seasoned metaphorizing capacity.
The ability to draw insightful connections across different areas of life.
Exactly. Applying that accumulated understanding to complex human problems.
So wrapping this up, this whole deep dive really underscores that human intelligence isn't some fixed single thing we measure with one number.
Not at all. It's dynamic. It's multifaceted. It's this constant interplay between our biology, our culture, our personal experiences.
It's a challenge to look beyond those standard measures, isn't it? To see the different ways people can be brilliant.
Absolutely. The real richness isn't about how smart you are on one narrow scale. It's about your unique blend of intelligences.
And how you use them.
How they come alive when you solve problems, create things, contribute something that's valued in your world.
So here's something for you, the listener, to think about. How might recognizing your own unique profile of intelligences, or recognizing them in the people around you, change things?
Yeah, how might it change your approach to learning or collaboration?
Or even how you define success for yourself, or appreciate it in others? It's quite a profound shift in perspective, really.
Definitely something to mull over.
Until our next deep dive.